Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most, Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go after the lefts, we go after the rights, we go after the middle and independents, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, August the 3rd, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host and most, Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense of all. Before we start, guys, to let you know that we do try to be as much as a info informing podcast. We try to be also family friendly. So there may be words sometimes that may fly. It's also there may be some things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. Aside from that, welcome. So usually we try to start on an upbeat, but unfortunately we do have some sad news to talk about because this week we have lost two great historical African American figures that have transcended not only the world of sports, but also have broken barriers in television and science fiction. I am talking about the great Bill Russell and the great Nichelle Nichols.
Finally tonight, we remember the life and careers of two American icons, NBA Hall of Famer Bill Russell and actress Nichelle Nichols. Beyond the basketball court and the small screen, their legacy of change lives on. Here's CBS's Jim Axelrod.
If you can't be what you can't see, then Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols gave millions of Americans something special to look at. Russell, the man who won 11 NBA championships as the Boston Celtics center in the 1950s and 60s, was also the first black head coach in the NBA.
I never felt like I was making a contribution. I was just doing the best I could.
But his Presidential Medal of Freedom, awarded in 2011 by Barack Obama, recognized his work off the court as well, as a civil rights activist who stood up for the rights and dignity of all men.
Captain, I'm picking up the alien signal again.
As Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek, Nichols' role was a rarity. A black woman starring as an equal member of the crew of the USS Enterprise. Her kiss with William Shatner was one of the first interracial kisses on U.S. television at a time when the civil rights struggle was center stage.
There was a big concern that there would be a big fuss about that.
Her barrier breaking was noted by Martin Luther King as the first non-stereotypical role portrayed by a black woman in television history. By broadening the range of who we might see when looking at our world, Nichelle Nichols and Bill Russell did nothing less than change our world. Jim Axelrod.
And absolutely right. Again, rest in peace to both those great pioneers, especially for a lot of those people that know. MLK did have an impact on Nichelle Nichols' life. He was actually the reason that she stayed on Star Trek. That was a little fun fact that a lot of people don't know about MLK, that he knew in his brief but short time on this earth, he knew the representation mattered, and especially on Star Trek, as I'm a Trekkie fan myself, to see our people represented in an area where we don't get represented. I mean, number one on TV, number one on a sci-fi show, Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry was definitely ahead of his time, showing a far off future to where we actually were seen as equal. But that's one of the main reasons why I love Star Trek. But definitely RIP to both Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols, and peace and condolences to their families, because Bill Russell himself, pioneer, 11-time NBA champion, civil rights activist, which again, he got to meet the likes of Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. So that just goes to tell you, the man has lived quite a life, and both have had an amazing impact on the culture. That's just being honest. But again, just sad to lose both in the same week. That being said, guys, we do want to shift gears because, again, Two things have happened in two different states. A state that is actually seeing that they need to protect women's rights, and a state that's really embracing their right to life. Let's start with Kansas first.
This morning, abortion rights advocates are celebrating after voters in red state Kansas rejected an amendment that would have removed the right to an abortion from the state's constitution.
The level of work and effort that so many people put into making sure that Kansas doesn't have to worry about one of these extreme total bans on accessing reproductive health care services. I mean, I feel really proud to be a Kansan tonight.
About 60% of voters were in favor of preserving abortion rights in Kansas, a state with 350,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats.
For this group, those gathered here today, they were shattered by the news of Roe versus Wade being overturned weeks ago. Today, they are celebrating this victory and hope that it sends a message ahead of the critical midterm elections less than 100 days away.
Meanwhile, overnight in Missouri, an expected tight race turned into a blowout. Eric Schmidt won the
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to cut off right there just because it goes to the primary races which are still going on. But yes, look at Kansas, a place where usually Kansas doesn't always go blue, but decided that on their voting in on the amendment changing of banning abortions in their states, turns out that the amendment failed, which again is surprising, but I have been saying this, guys. I have been saying this because actually I've been saying this since last year. And now look at us. We're in August. Midterms are in September. Midterms are in September. We're not too far away from a lot of things being ramped up. Depending on your state, I know mine in Tennessee, the primaries for our local and government and state representatives is underway. And I'm pretty sure they are in massive states, as you just saw from the overclip from Kansas. But I keep saying this all the time. I used to say, up until Roe versus Wade got overturned, I used to say that Democrats are going to have a harder time convincing Democrats are going to have a harder time convincing voters than Republicans. Then Republicans came out, not only showed their ass with how they care about protecting women, they also showed their ass about how they protect veterans, which is a story we'll get into very shortly. But the thing about it is now Republicans have pissed off, in my opinion, the two nearly biggest group of voters. Number one, you've pissed off women. Number two, you've pissed off veterans. And combine that with minorities and other people who simply do not want to vote for Republicans because Republicans only care about rich old white men. Now all of a sudden the midterm isn't as clear as the midterm may not be as clear as day as it was once before. This could be a chance the Democrats could also extend. They could also extend their majority in the House and Senate. I can only imagine. But as you can tell, a lot of those voters out there are starting to actually be active. And Kansas has sat there and said, we're going to preserve the right of choice because that's what it should be. No matter what the right to life, the pro-birth and pro-life individuals and extreme Christians say otherwise. But that's only one state. Georgia, on the other hand, has decided to go all the way right, which again, in Georgia's case, Georgia residents can now claim embryos as dependents on state taxes. Yes, you heard that. As you can see from the NBC News article, taxpayers who have an unborn child with a detectable heartbeat as of last month can get $3,000 on taxes for each unborn child. Are you freaking kidding me? This was a ruling that was done back on June 24th. U.S. Supreme Court did rule in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, and also the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in Sister Song versus Kemp that, quote unquote, the department will recognize any unborn child with a detectable human heartbeat as eligible for the Georgia individual income tax dependent exemption. Are you fracking kidding me? Do you understand the level of mess that's going to cause? The level of unsheer mess that's going to cause. As long as it's a detectable heartbeat, there's going to be people say, I'm going to claim this on my taxes. And why? Because I don't see how And feel free to say this in the comments. I'm just curious. I don't see how that's a good idea. A detectable human heartbeat for an unborn child, which is amazing that it's still. I mean, until it has a detectable human heartbeat, it's like, so I can claim it. It hasn't been born yet, but I can claim it in Georgia, which again, this just goes to show you that some states, depending on their populations, believe in protecting the woman. Some states, unfortunately, go to the extremes of protecting a child until it's born. Not just Republican Party. There are some people that believe out there that a child should be protected. A child who is in the womb of a person, who is in the womb of a mother, or any other individual should be born. Not the fact that it could harm the mother in any sense, or any sense, way, form, or fashion. And now in Georgia, as it is legal, that if you are pregnant and it has a detectable heartbeat, you can now claim it on your taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, your tax dollars idiotically at work. But speaking of things at work, because again, I never want to seem one-sided, because I see people in the comments going, "You never show Fox News. You always show the left side of media." No, because that's the thing about it kills me. Before I show this, I got to point this out. You realize only one side is saying divisive. One side starts saying divisive. We weren't, and I knew we were, and I'm like I said, America wasn't always united. Trump was just the makeup remover that got installed. Because honestly, Fox News is not a real news station. I don't know how many times I could say this. Fox News is not a real life news station. They do not have any journalists credible as it is. They don't have any credible journalists on their staff. They haven't won any awards. They have not won any journalism awards. They have not won any writers awards, publisher awards. You know what awards show they won? Supposedly the #1 watched cable news show. Supposedly. That's not saying a lot. Friends was the #1 show, even though they ripped off Living Single. Again, having that somewhat, they believe, prestigious award doesn't mean spit. That being said, is the reason why, in this most recent news, that the U.S. did kill the most recent Al Qaeda leader. Watch what happens, because this is what Fox does: divisiveness. Ever since Trump and Kelly Conway, which is an amazing name, accurate name for her, sat there and said, "We're going to dismiss facts as alternative, and then take our opinion as facts." This is what happens when you watch something on NBC and then Fox, and then you wonder why so many people unfortunately still watch Fox. Maybe because it caters to them. You be the judge.
That will be President Biden's bin Laden moment. This is a huge, huge win for the U.S. You'll remember Zawahiri was a deputy under Osama bin Laden on 9/11. He is one of the most wanted terrorists, has been for a long time. Here's the FBI sheet on him. This is, again, 2 intelligence sources saying that this is a big counterterrorism win for the U.S.
His administration has pulled this off despite all the criticism for the U.S. finally ending this 20-year war in Afghanistan. Pulled this off with a CIA operation, no civilian casualties, 78 years old with COVID. I actually think this might be an instance where you have to give the president some damn credit, because that is actually a very big deal.
Tonight, Biden gave a speech boasting that he's killed an al-Qaeda figure in Afghanistan. Great. Feel safer? Of course you don't. Nobody does. And the reason nobody feels safer is Biden's response to the disaster in Afghanistan. And his withdrawal from that country almost a year ago was the single most humiliating moment in American foreign policy since the fall of Saigon in April of 1975.
Unsurprisingly, he was killed in Afghanistan, where terrorist organizations, it's now become a safe haven. They have been rapidly gaining ground since Biden abandoned the country last year. As a result, the world is a much more dangerous place. ISIS, al-Qaeda are surging in Afghanistan. The mullahs of Iran, they are threatening now to build outright a nuclear weapon, blow up New York City. That is a direct threat.
Astonishingly, the leader of the Republican Party, the party's last president and their likely next presidential nominee, said just this weekend that, quote, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11. He literally said that this weekend. Nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11. What was that all about? Well, it took 20 years and 10 months, but actually somebody definitively has gotten to the bottom of 9/11.
Now, over a decade ago, when President Obama announced the killing of Osama bin Laden after a dramatic and effective Navy SEAL mission. Here we are, over a decade later, and it is the vice president for that president who is now president, Joe Biden.
I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed
Ayman al-Zawahiri.
At my direction, the United States launched
a precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all.
It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by
the attacks that murdered 2,977 people on American soil.
So, yes, the reason why I wanted to point that out so much was basically because it is amazing to me how both sides, one side will report the news as it is. It's the news. Present the facts and let that be it. Allow you to inform yourself, much like what this show does. Then you have Fox News and Newsmax and The Blaze and various other right-wing shows that have popped up and have ran with it. Because, again, with the Fox head of Hydra, actually all I was missing was Laura Ingraham from that, Tucker talked about, oh, well, are we really safe? Are we truly safe? Sean Hannity, oh, we may have gotten the leader, but Afghanistan is still a safe haven since we left. All Fox News usually does is tout Republican nonsense and talking points. Again, but that's Fox News. People feel comfortable with Fox News, so they be watching it. I said it myself many times. I used to go into restaurants looking to see what type of television shows they play. If they play Fox News, I'm out. Because I can already tell if they're comfortable with that, I can only imagine what else they're comfortable with. But again, yes, it should be acknowledged that Biden did actually get the current leader of Al-Qaeda in a drone strike in an area to where he still made the right decision of pulling out American troops from Afghanistan. We're not the world police. Let's see what he does the same thing with Ukraine. Now, again, Ukraine is one of those to where I feel like NATO forces should be doing more than the U.S. currently because Russia's still invading them, still trying to claim whatever ground that Putin believes he does. And let's not also pretend to forget. Fox News for about a short, brief period in time had a love affair with Putin. When Trump was president, they had a love affair with Putin. Had I thought about this, I would have went back and found those clips where they talked about Putin like, oh, he's such a great leader and all this. And you're thinking at a time where it's like, he's a dictator. And they're just fawning over him. Of course, this was the time that Trump did try to bring Putin to the U.S., and let's just say that didn't go over well. But again, I just want to point that out. It's amazing how one side tells the news exactly how it is. The other side sounds like every time they announce something, it's the end of the world. Again, not surprised, it's Fox News. But moving forward, guys, I did want to tell this little tidbit because if you're wondering about the price of gas and it's slowly going down, well, there's some other news that you should know about. OPEC did agree to produce slightly more oil. They're actually increasing their production. OPEC, keep in mind, is the global conglomerate of countries that produce oil. Russia is included in that. So what they have decided to do, for all those that want to know what the Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, sat there and said that they would produce an additional 100,000 barrels a day in September. Now, this does come post after President Joe Biden did visit Saudi Arabia last month and did urge Saudi Arabian family, which again, the number one producer of oil in the world, to start pumping more. So again, what does that mean? Now that they're pumping out 100,000 barrels more a day, will prices still go down? Yes. But again, it still screams to me, because as a climate change person who's aware of climate change, and if you don't believe climate change is real, understand the last 2 months, we've all been on God's hot plate. From California to Maine, every place has either been extremely hot or has severe weather. That is a sign of climate change. We as a whole are producing more carbon emissions from fossil fuels, from other type of emissions that again are causing the greenhouse gas effect. This is basically 8th grade science. 8th grade science has taught us a lot, especially about the greenhouse effect, in which, yes, the earth is getting warmer, not cooler, warmer. And you can tell every time summer comes around, because those winters are getting shorter and shorter, and those summer heat, especially in being in South Tennessee, are getting longer. And I keep saying this all the time. That is why the Green Deal that is still being discussed right now is so vital. That is exactly why the Green Deal needs to pass, that climate change needs to pass, that somehow Joe Manchin is still on board. Let's hurry up and pass this, because apparently, while the Democrats still have time and before elections, can still get this to Biden's desk. We shall see. But again, gas prices are going down, but I, at this point, would welcome electric cars. If only that semiconductor bill would get signed, so that factories can be built, so that we can be competitive and we can start to turn. Because truth be told, scientists have sat there and told us we honestly have the next 2 decades, which means 20 years to try to do this before we get to the point of no return. And that's the thing. Once we get to the point of no return, that's it. And eventually, we are going to have to start paying attention to the fact that you can't eat money, not in a world that's uninhabitable. That's all I'm saying. Moving right along, guys, unfortunately, I have 2 stories involving 2 young black kids that, again, whenever it comes to black children and law enforcement, I wonder, especially as a parent myself, I wonder about future children, especially if I do have sons. I wonder what happened. Situations like this, no parent wants to consider, but at the same time, this is becoming all too common.
Moving. I kept going down.
It's the scary moments with Arlington Police. This teenage boy named Rakeem says he's lucky to have survived on Monday.
I was very terrified. I was so terrified I couldn't move my body.
Rakeem says he just come home and was preparing to head out for a swim when a couple of officers stopped him in the complex with guns drawn.
They told me to put some weapon down. I didn't know what they were talking about at first.
Police say they were dispatched to the complex after a neighbor called 911. The neighbor told the dispatcher he'd been looking through his door's peephole and had seen a male at his door wearing a hoodie and holding a firearm that was partially covered by a towel. The unarmed teen, still confused and paralyzed with fear, says the situation with police only escalated as more officers began showing up and shouting orders.
He gets his rifle and he's punching it directly at me. I get more scared. And then my body starts to shake. I can't move. My body feels stiff. And in my mind, I was like, what should I do?
The teen says he thought he was going to be killed right outside his home.
I'm conflicted, but also I'm more pissed off than anything.
Dr. Raylius Johnson is Rakeem's older brother and guardian. He rushed to the complex after getting a call advising neighbors to shelter in place.
It was at least 30 cars, 4 snipers, 2 over here, 2 right there.
Johnson says he didn't know Rakeem was the guy police were surrounding at first until he was able to call the frightened teen.
I burst into tears saying, come save me, they're about to shoot me.
Johnson says at first officers ignored him when he told them they had the wrong guy.
Right now I'm just happy that he's here, but I'm still really upset about the whole situation.
An upsetting situation that's not only traumatized this family.
The only thing they said to me was, sorry for the misunderstanding, we apologize. That wasn't enough for me. They had me at gunpoint.
But unfortunately changed one teen's view of police.
And that's what happens. That's honestly what happens. Now, I'm glad that young man's still alive. I am extremely glad. But imagine, and I say this all the time, that a lot of people do not take in consideration that there is a big disconnect whenever certain keywords are said and how police look at black people. Look, for example, for all those that have seen me in person or seen my videos, I'm a big dude. I'm a big dude. I got locks, for all those that can see. Even though I have a lot more gray hair, but I got locks. I'm a big dude. I'm black, of course, obviously I'm black. I have locks. If I'm out and about, I am already perceived. I'm perceived as an aggressor. I am perceived as a threat. I am perceived as anything else but a normal, law-abiding citizen. So imagine if I was in that same position that young man was. A call comes in and says, I think somebody with a hoodie on may possibly have a weapon that has a towel under it. They're hiding it with a towel. Let's say I'm going outside. I have a towel. And police roll up on me. No questions asked, guns drawn, telling me to drop a weapon that I simply do not have. To a 16-year-old child. Child, mind you. Yes, teenager. Yes, but a child. We have seen many times interactions with black people and law enforcement that have ended in fatalities. So I can only imagine what's going through that young man's mind. He's sitting there trying to remain calm. Imagine the whole thing trying to remain calm while officers, instead of them trying to de-escalate the situation and see if they got the right person, immediately assumed towel, immediately assumed black kid, which they didn't say whether or not that he had on a hoodie. But I can only imagine he's going swimming. Why does he need a hoodie? But at the same time, assumed he was the perpetrator, and guess what they did? Guns drawn, not trying to de-escalate the situation. Luckily, this young black man was able to go back home to his brother. But could you imagine the story? Law enforcement again kills another black kid who was unarmed only because they listened to a 911 call. And this is the problem I have with law enforcement. Aside from the fact that law enforcement doesn't require adequate training, does not get all the facts. Because I would be more concerned about the 911 call that had so much description that it almost felt like, did someone try to weaponize the police against this kid? Think about that for a second. Somebody gave enough description to where it was almost like, I'm going to direct the police at him. And this isn't the first time we've heard people use the police as weapons against black people. That's just what I took from it. But I also sat there and also understand that black child. I understand that black man when he's like, well, once they realized they didn't have the right person, they apologized. They said they were sorry. I'm like, that's not good enough. Because it's not. It's never good enough. It's never good enough to be accused of something that you did not do. At the same time, the trauma still sticks with you. Like I said before, every black person out there, correct? I mean, I've yet to be wrong about this. Every black person out there, when they reach a certain age, have all had a police story where you've been either accused, falsely accused, you've been harassed, or you've been, go down the list. Every black person has a police story, sometimes even more than one. And yet, when the police do something that bad and come to find out that they're completely in the wrong, nothing happens to them. There's no recourse. There's no investigation on why all this manpower, all these resources were directed at one individual. What happened to canvassing? What actually happened? What actually happened to doing the work? What actually happened to de-escalating situations? None of it. They immediately assumed he was the perpetrator, and that's what they ran with. But this is why sometimes as a parent, every time my child is out of my sight, I can't help it in the back of my mind, he's not going to be seen. And again, as black parents, we have that discussion with our kids. I know my folks had it with me. You are not seen as a citizen in law enforcement eyes. You are not seen as a citizen. You are perceived as a threat. The older you get, the more you're going to understand that. My old man told me that. And he was right. He always sat there and said, this is why you got to think 5 steps ahead. This is why you always have to be aware of your situations. This is why you always got to have your head on a swivel, because they will use it against you. And I hate to say that every black parent has had that conversation because we have to be, out of all ethnic groups, I don't mean to go into a rant, but after all the ethnic groups, we're the only ones out there that have to give this talk to our children to make sure our children come back home. But yes, I wonder, what's going to be the police ramifications for this? Because you almost ended an innocent child's life. There needs to be some accountability on law enforcement side. But then again, you could study longer to be a plumber, an anesthesiologist, a hairstylist, longer, because they take up to a year. I can tell you with full confidence, in the state of Tennessee, you can go to the police academy for less than 6 months. Less than 6 months, and you're out there on the force. It's not enough training. We don't have the bar set high enough. We need police reform. Plain and simple. Not only for the fact of how they did a 16-year-old, this 11-year-old also was done in a way that should also be questionable by police.
It's been nearly a week since Kids Day took place at the California State Fair.
We want some policies put in place and oversight to prevent any future incidents where there is child abuse by law enforcement at Cal Expo again.
But as the fair came to an end,
the police department themselves provided first aid that night and bandaged his bleeding arm. His shirt was covered with blood.
11-year-old Elijah Hunter's family, along with Black Lives Matter and the Greater Sacramento National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, are calling into question Cal Expo's police's behavior, saying that Elijah was tackled the evening of July 19th and causing injuries to him.
So they knew that they injured him because they provided the first aid before we even made it to Kaiser Hospital, where he did receive further treatment.
A spokesperson at Cal Expo says that the boy only suffered a small cut. In the statement, Cal Expo says that police were called about a child attempting to steal items from fair vendors and climbing over a safety fence and almost being hit by a roller coaster ride. However, advocates say that nothing excuses the behavior from Cal Expo officers toward the minor.
What makes him different from any other 11-year-old? And I'll tell you what it is. He's black. He's a black man, a black male. It doesn't matter your age when it comes to the society and law enforcement. You are treated differently.
The family and attorney are also concerned about a document that they say that Elijah was forced to sign without any family members present. Cal Expo says that when their policies are violated, fairgoers are asked to not return and sign a document agreeing to such.
And again, that's crazy. I have to ask this question. Number one, was it him? Was it him? Because honestly, that's where I'd be on this. Number one, they said they had reports of a child stealing from fair vendors. Okay. Well, this fair, he also jumped security gates and almost got hit by a roller coaster. Was it him? You would think in an area to where they have many camera security and personnel that they can validate this. But why, out of all the people running with his friends, that he was the only one that got caught? He was the only one that got caught up. I mean, his parents asked a very good question. He was running with a group of people, and yet he was the one that was singled out. Doesn't sound right. Even more so, they tried down to, oh, it was only a small cut. To any parent, when your child gets injured, saying it's small, no big deal. Look, that's not for you to say. That's not your child. Especially to a mother. Don't ever stand and tell a mother her child was injured. Oh, but it's only a small cut. No, you don't get to say spit except get out my way. Get me to my child, or I'm gonna go through you. Every black mom says that. Don't get between a woman and her child, because you will see those are the kind of things that you see on National Geographic. So I'm gonna point out to you. But also, again, it's like there's almost so much justification how they treat the child. And at the same time, no cameras, no nothing, just assumptions. But again, there's another black child who now had to sign. And of course, the other part was signing the document. Well, we require any time that signed document never come again. He's a child. He shouldn't be signing anything without his parents present. Even schools know that. No child can ever go to school and sign something without a parent present. No child will ever go anywhere or sign any document without their parents or legal guardian present. But it sounds, and I don't blame them for them concerning litigation. I don't blame them. Because again, that goes right back into the whole thing of being perceived as guilty, as a suspect, all the above. And again, this is why I sit there and say, this time, I used to say a lot of times, I used to pause while bringing children into this world. I said, because of what they're going to go through. But at the same time, there has to be something that needs to be done. But we'll follow that story up as it develops. But on some other news, guys, I did want to talk about the PACT Act. Remember the PACT Act? Remember the PACT Act that literally made everybody, I mean, you would think for 1 second that the PACT Act that was put in, that was supposed to help veterans, providing medical aid and assistance for those that did get sick or did develop cancer from toxic fumes from burning pits. You would think this should be a no-brainer because Democrats already support the troops. The GOP is one of those folks that always say, oh, we support the troops. We support the troops. We should do this. And you remember that every Republican said no. Every Republican shot down the PACT Act because they claimed it was a cash grab. It was a slush fund. Even myself on TikTok, I had to sit there and tell people there's a big difference in the actual PACT Act. Nothing was changed except one thing, to make sure to change it from discretionary spending to mandatory spending. For a lot of those that don't know, GOP love discretionary spending because that means that they can control where the funds are going within the within the limits of the bill, which means that everything out of the funding itself, they can decide where the money goes versus mandatory. Mandatory means that exactly whatever the money is appropriated for in the bill is where it goes. There is no control over it. It is merely an enforcer to make sure that those funds are allocated and spent appropriately. No government oversight, except for those making sure that again the money is allocated and spent. GOP hate mandatory spending. That's why they hate the ACA. That's why they hated Obamacare, because a lot of that was mandatory. There were very few things that were discretionary within Obamacare, but the ACA is mandatory. And again, who was the main group of people that hated the ACA? Who hates the ACA? Republicans. The reason why I point this out is because, again, one of the Republicans, before the news I'm about to say, decided to defend themselves in really spouting the greatest line of BS. Optometrist / I'm the doctor of everything else, Rand Paul. You didn't think he could get any lower? Yeah? Watch this.
Care of our veterans and keep our country strong. This bill puts our economy, though, at risk by creating presumptions of service connection for the most common of ailments. For example, this legislation creates a presumption of service connection for Vietnam veterans for hypertension. But according to the CDC, 50% of men and 44% of women in the United States have hypertension. More than 60% of people over the age of 60 have hypertension. In total, the CDC estimates that 116 million Americans have hypertension. The legislation also creates a presumption of service connection for global war on terror veterans for asthma. The CDC estimates that 1 in 12 people have asthma, which is approximately 25 million Americans.
Tell me, how do you say that you don't support the troops without saying you don't support the troops? That was Rand Paul, who literally and figuratively tried to rationalize why he's saying no. Because for the first time, a Republican believes in two things. One, believes the CDC. Number two, believes in pre-existing conditions. If only we could go back to before Obamacare was trying to get passed and the ACA law was trying to get passed, I could have sworn someone, oh, that's right, Rand Paul, decided to sit there and say that pre-existing conditions don't exist. The same Rand Paul that just yesterday, this day before yesterday, tried to sit there and say, well, we can't really approve the PACT Act because pre-existing conditions exist, and we can't prove that this happened during their time they're serving. See, this goes back to what I said at the beginning of this podcast, that, again, the GOP cannot afford, they've already figured out that they're not going to have a lot of women voting for them. They figured it out after Roe versus Wade. You damn near have all but maybe a few voters that are going to still vote Republican. But veterans is a large number of individuals out there. And a lot of those veterans need help. The VA is a mess. The VA is a mess. I cannot stress that enough. The VA system is a joke. These men and women who have served our country deserve more without question. And as the PACT Act will ensure that they are getting the help that they need, you have guys that have never served but will gladly start a war for no reason, turning around sitting there saying, no, we can't approve this because it's a slush fund, which again is bullshit. It's not. But thankfully, as of yesterday, common sense prevailed by a large margin, actually.
And the Senate has just passed a bill to expand health care benefits to millions of veterans exposed to toxic burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. The 86-11 vote coming after Republicans agreed to lift the blockade of the bill following days of protests by comedian Jon Stewart and veterans groups. Legislation was approved by the House in July.
So again, think about that for a second. Veterans and protesters shame the GOP 86-11. That means 11, all but 11 Republicans, and yes, all Republicans voted. All the Republicans, some Republicans crossed that line. They did. Reason being, because again, it's midterm season. Midterm elections are just a month off. Republicans cannot afford to take the veteran hit. And keep in mind, the simple fact of the matter is that's going to be a reminder, because I do like the fact that they sat there and was like, oh, well, we really need to lift the blockade on this, because if we don't, we will lose our seats. Yeah, by a freaking landslide. So I would like to say the Republicans did get some common sense and did come back and decide to do the right thing. I would like to say that, but at the same time, midterm elections are coming up. Time to save your job. But 11 Republicans voted against it, which tells me that those same 11 Republicans are not running for office again, because I can only imagine that their counterparts will be waiting in the wings in the debate to point that out to them, that they really that the face of the GOP is really about protecting money and power. It has nothing to do about protecting about protecting life, respecting and saluting our army. It has nothing to do with that. The GOP is all about power. You can obviously tell that, because they care about a child. They care about a child being born, but after it's born, they care less. They love our troops, but when our troops come back home and need help in all aspects, they ignore them. They sit there and say that they love women, but yet force women to become broodmares against their will, since turning down Roe versus Wade. The GOP doesn't care about anybody except rich old white men and corporations. When it comes down to it, all they want is power. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. But before we get to our feel-good segment, guys, one last story. I know last week we talked about a certain January 6th rioter who apparently got the longest stint. Well, in the case of the Hold My Beer, he actually got beat, because instead of this person getting the last person who got 6 years, this individual got 7. Again, still not enough.
In the case of Guy Reffitt, that convicted rioter, essentially, I want to get right to NBC's Ken Delanian, who is outside federal court here in Washington, and MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. The sentence, Ken, just over 7 years, huh?
Moments ago, handed down, Hallie, 7.25 years. Now, that's on the lower range of what the judge ruled the guidelines suggested were appropriate in this case. And the prosecution was asking for much more, as high as 15 years in prison. They lost on a couple of legal issues. Most importantly, their effort to seek a terrorism enhancement. to label this case domestic terrorism. The judge declined to do that. This sentence followed a roller coaster day of legal arguments, and which culminated in Guy Reffitt himself speaking before the judge and sort of making a last-minute plea that he was remorseful and apologetic after months of saying the opposite and essentially arguing from jail that he was a martyr and fundraising. And he even suggested that some of his rhetoric was really about raising money for his family. The judge made it pretty clear she didn't buy it, that she thought he was just telling her what she wanted to hear. But at the end of the day, she sentenced him to a hefty prison sentence, the longest of any of the January 6th defendants. The previous longest was 5 years, but nonetheless, much, much less than prosecutors were seeking. Prosecutors had tried to portray Reffitt as standing alone among January 6th defendants in his malevolence, but they did not succeed in convincing the judge today, Howard.
I want to get back to some of what we heard from Guy Reffitt, Ken, as he was delivering his own statement to bring viewers up to speed there, because it is colorful, to say the least. But, Danny, let me get your initial reaction from the legal perspective on the sentence, what it means, and what it says.
Defendants have an absolute right to address the court. That doesn't mean that they should in all circumstances, especially in a case like this where there might be appellate issues. It's often very risky to put your client on the stand at a federal sentencing hearing because they may say something that would compromise the appellate rights. I mean, everything they say is on the record and they're essentially testifying. So that can be a real challenge. In terms of the sentence meted out, 7 years is on the lower end of the guidelines. And generally speaking, judges, if they like to be safe, will sentence within the guidelines, even though it's not required, because it really insulates them from appellate review. There's that presumption that a sentence within the guidelines is acceptable. Wasn't expecting the judge to go too far below the guidelines, given the number of charges and all the factors involved here. But, even with all of these different kinds of defendants in January 6th, it's hard to find someone that is exactly like the other. Even in a situation like this, no two defendants are really identical.
Okay, so I had to stop it right there just because, number one, this individual, okay, let me point this out to you. This guy carried a weapon, armed with a gun, right? There are many protesters there on January 6th, no question. That individual they're talking about, right, armed with a gun, went literally into a government building. Again, for all those that don't know, firearms are not allowed in government buildings. He crossed into a government building with a firearm during a whole bunch of Trump people who at that point should have been considered domestic terrorists, because again, they were trying to overthrow a government action as they were counting electoral college votes. So these individuals, again, going into a government building because they were razzed up by Trump, and at the same time decided to try to overthrow the government, armed with a gun, gets 7 years. 7 years. 7 years and a quarter. 7.25. I don't understand that, because they denied the judge who gave the 7.25 sentence denied the request for a terrorism enhancement, which means that, again, they would have been labeled as terrorists and more than likely would have got anywhere between 15 and 20 years. My thing is, 7 years seems like a slap on the wrist to me. This is why I sit there and say a lot of people are not, how can I put this so nicely? A lot of people are not taking this seriously because these individuals who, again, stormed the Capitol, again, should have been labeled as terrorists, are not getting lengthy prison sentences. They're not. That was 7. That was the longest one. The one last week before that was 5 years because a black person who was a Trump fan, who wasn't armed, got 5 years for assaulting Capitol Police. This individual was armed with a gun and got 2 more years, but 2 more years than that. But nobody out this bunch is being labeled as terrorist. I'm sorry, make that make sense. Because a lot of us, on the day thereof, January 6th, when we were all watching this all go down, how many of us had the same thought? If all those people had been black, they would still be mopping up the U.S. Capitol they'd be mopping up the blood from the U.S. Capitol right now. If all those people had been black and all of them had rushed the Capitol, it would have been a different story. But it's amazing to me how these individuals are not being labeled as terrorists, because that is the greatest threat to the U.S. right now. White people basically being terrorists, but not being given the label for it. It just doesn't make any sense. But moving on, guys, we're going to go into our feel-good segment, because usually how the fact we got here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, and sometimes we use of faith in humanity. But hey, it is Wednesday. It's hump day. Tomorrow being Friday, which is Thursday. We do want to leave you guys out in some good vibrations, and hopefully the story will do it. The story that I found is really an inspiration, because this person, despite their situations, they are determined to make it in the sport of baseball. And I couldn't say anything but give respect once I watched this.
Tonight, America Strong, the teen baseball player overcoming challenges, proving nothing can stand in his way.
Landis Sims was born without hands and his lower legs, but that has never stopped him from pursuing his love of baseball.
Run, run, run!
Here he is at age 2.
Show him your wind up and your pitch.
Ever since he was a little boy, Landis has dreamed big.
Run, Landis, run, buddy! I was born missing my hands and feet. When I grow up, I want to play baseball for the Yankees.
Fast forward. This is Landis now. At 16, more impressive than ever, still playing baseball. And now a member of his school's varsity team in Indiana. He's the subject of a newly released documentary, Landis, Just Watch Me.
I want to be a starter. I want to be the reason that we win.
Touring the country this week, meeting with aspiring young players who love baseball, but like Landis, face similar challenges.
Does it hurt when you walk outside?
Sometimes. You know, you got to work through your challenges in baseball, and everybody does that. It's not just me. So it kind of relates back to everyday life for me.
Overcoming obstacles, exceeding expectations, now working to inspire others.
So a lot of what I do is I'll just go out and I'll do it and show them that I can do it.
Wow. Can't wait to see.
I mean, dude, you got the one thing I will say above all else, that kid's got determination. And I will never knock a child who's got that type of fire. That tells you he's going to make it. It really does. But that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this podcast. So I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know us live. I certainly appreciate that. Before we get out of here, some shameless plugging. Let me first start with my buddy Vaughn, BigBZA. You can find him on all socials. Vaughn was on Facebook. As you can see, his podcast showing there. Of course, he is back to making beats. Yes, he is going back to what makes back to his talents, back to making beats. Definitely check him out on his beat page at BigBZA. And definitely reach out to him for any beats that you might like, because you never know. He might sell them to you. He's that good. But anyway, check him out, BigBZA on all socials. Vaughn Westboom on the Bot Westboom. Oh, that was a terrible segue. Check him out on Facebook. That being said, guys, of course, all my socials, IG, TikTok, Snapchat, all of them are the same, BlackFox447. You can follow me there, as I usually post reviews on everything I watch, and also some gem stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I am all about, motivating and trying to motivate others, being positive, because my whole thing is, guys, we have actually been through a lot to where I just have to say we should be kinder. I don't mean you got to be good Samaritan, you have to go out of your way, but hey, if you got friends, check up on them. See how they're doing. If you see people like as brothers, this is the one thing this is one thing I can't stress enough. If I see another brother and he needs me, I'm gonna say, man, how's it going? What's up? How you doing? Greet each other. We can at least greet each other. It's not always about hating. It's not always about, what this man might do to me, but at least greet each other. And my whole thing is about being kind, because you never know you don't know what the other person's going through. So if you just say hi, hello, check in with somebody, you might be more just brighten up their day. You actually may save a life in the process. So again, be kind. It takes zero energy to be nice. It takes 100% of your energy to be a dick. So fracking be nice. Also, with the ticker that I have at the bottom, we make that just a little bit bigger. This is where you can also find it. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it'll take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bitten, of course, also on this podcast. Definitely check them all there. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Let people know about it. And again, as I usually say on these things, guys, let me know what you think. You like, don't like, agree, disagree. I'm all about conversation. It's not about right or wrong. It's about trying to hear the other side out and really go from there. That's all I am wanting to do. Start that conversation. Again, guys, COVID is real. Apparently monkeypox is too, since cases have went up. So again, guys, yes, we're going to go back to masks. Please mask up if you're going to be in high density, high traffic areas. Please protect yourself. When you protect yourself, you protect others. That's how we're going to get through this. This pandemic is not over yet, but we must be vigilant. The last thing I said about how the Frack got here, guys, is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind for yourself. But we want to provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as a society once we're informed. We are progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions that we should have done back then that we do now, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Reserve of Governors, electing our first 4-star Black general from the Marine Corps, and electing our first woman to a high-ranking position as a commander in the U.S. Navy. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Take care of yourselves and each other, guys, and we will all get through this. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.